Good afternoon. I'm Rick Wade, Senior Vice President at the United States Chamber of Commerce. I believe that we all agree that all Americans should have the opportunity to earn their success, to rise on their merit, and live their own American dream. But, far too often, the opportunity to reach that goal is still determined by gender, by race, and sexual orientation, and other factors. Ensuring diversity, equity, and inclusion is first about acknowledging that opportunity gaps do exist in our country. It's about recognizing that bias, whether conscious or unconscious, in companies, whether they're large or small, in agencies, government agencies, in our society, prevents us from maximizing our full potential. Last year, the United States Chamber of Commerce launched what we call the Equality of Opportunity Initiative that's really focused on closing race-based and other inequalities in our society, advancing public and private sector solutions in domains like education and unemployment, entrepreneurship, criminal justice, and health and wealth. According to a revealing study by one of our partner organizations, the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, the American economy stands to gain $8 trillion by 2050 simply by closing the racial equity gap. We know the business community is the most powerful voice to make change across industries and issues, including LGBT inclusion and empowerment. We're proud of our work at the U.S. Chamber Foundation, working with the Guild Foundation, a multi-year partnership called Incorporating Inclusion, a first of its kind research and education initiative established to demonstrate the corporate and community value of LGBT inclusive workplaces. We know there's a moral imperative for diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's the right thing to do. And just as sound is the business and economic case. And the business case for LGBT inclusion in the workplace is resounding. Diverse workplace teams solve problems more quickly, and companies with diverse senior level teams are more successful. This data even translates into economic benefits for companies that engage in LGBTQ inclusive policies. Companies that adopt these policies show a long-term increase in financial performance compared to peer companies that do not. And there's also mounting evidence that greater diversity just leads to a better talent pool and a healthier workplace culture. And it continues to be important in areas like ensuring the opportunities of growth and expansion for LGBT-owned small businesses, getting them the capital they need and the opportunity to do business with corporate America through corporate supply chains. I meet monthly now with the heads of all of the national diverse business organizations, including the National LGBT Chamber of Commerce, and we're proud of the progress, the conversation that is now moving into action. So we look forward to this dialogue this afternoon, and we look forward, moreover, to moving from dialogue to real action to make sure, again, that every American, regardless of their sexual orientation, gender, or race, has a fair chance to live out that American dream. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Rick. My name is Lawrence Bowdish. I am the Senior Director for Research and Issue Networks for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation. And we've been operating with some LGBT programming for the past 3 years in partnership with the Guild Foundation. Rick's introduction really led us to see what it was that we could do in the LGBT space. And when we started this work 3 years ago, we worked primarily with large companies. And these large companies really were making massive strides in LGBT inclusion, both within their four walls and outside of them in their communities. After about a year and a half of working primarily with large companies, we had realized in our events and our research that small companies also had a really strong interest in managing LGBT inclusive work, but they had fewer resources to do it with. Some of them didn't have the same partnerships or in the communities where they could lean on the same types of efforts that the larger companies could. So approximately a year ago, we changed our focus to look at small company inclusionary efforts, what it was that they really needed and where they were successful. whether or not they were LGBT owned or owned by an ally, or just owned by folks that were interested in making sure that they were offering inclusive spaces for their clients and their customers and their staff. In that work, we were lucky enough to speak to 9 different communities of small businesses around the country. The first of those was on March 3rd of 2020 in DC. That event was in person. The remaining ones were not. One of the places we were able to sit down and have a conversation with about a dozen small businesses was Carborough, North Carolina. Their vice president of their chamber, Katie Luvis, was a close friend of the program and a solid ally of this work, and put us in touch with a number of small businesses. And when we talked to them to help notify our research, which we'll post a link to in the chat here in a bit, we found that these small businesses really had some amazing stories to tell, and they had really specific needs. So what we did, what we're launching today, is a hub that really addresses those resources. I'll let Wes and the panelists here in a bit talk about that. But first, I'm joined by Lori Paocelli, who is the executive director of the Visitors Bureau for Carborough, nearby Chapel Hill, and the surrounding area of Orange County. And so, Lori, I'd like to ask you, what value do business ecosystem partners, so chambers, visitors bureaus, regional planners, what value do they see in inclusionary efforts?
Oh, well, thank you so much first for having me, and thank you to Katie Luvis for bringing us on board. She's a great ambassador for our area. For those who don't know much about this area, first let me say that Carborough and Chapel Hill are neighbors, and the area is really known as a Southern University town area with a strong tradition of liberalism. So we all partner very closely together, our chambers, our businesses, our elected officials. And I will say that from a visitor bureau standpoint, what really ignited a fire with us was a former council member approached our office several years ago and said, well, you know, we really need your help in letting the national traveling public know that we're LGBT friendly. And that was really where it started. It really was where it started with a council member, a senior elder, the late Joe Herzenberg, who really helped to go on and train a lot of our LGBT people who are mayors today, council members, county commissioners. And after that, what we did as a visitor bureau is sat down and did a very tactical list of how we would get the message out and really roll out the welcome wagon in both with strategies and tactics, letting the traveling public and the travel trade know about everything Carborough and neighboring Chapel Hill had to offer.
Sure, and that really resonates with a lot of what we heard from these smaller and individual businesses, and we'll see more proof of that, I think, in the panel in just a few minutes. That local context matters, that having support, and frankly, that support doesn't have to be as strong, as broad, as sort of well placed as Carborough's, but that local support means that inclusionary efforts can be accelerated. When that support isn't there, that inclusion can be stymied. And so what are some of these tactical ways that the community in Carborough and Orange County, what are some of the tactical ways that these inclusionary efforts are shown by the community?
Yes, we do quite a bit, actually. The first thing we did was that we joined the International Gay Lesbian Travel Association and also a partner agency called Community Marketing, Inc. that's conducted a lot of research into LGBT travel. And they were meeting, in 2015 in Vancouver. So I approached our former Carborough mayor, Mike Nelson, one of the first openly gay mayors in North Carolina, to attend this conference with me. And so we went up to Vancouver and we shook a lot of hands and we did a lot of outreach, just organic outreach, telling people about Carborough and neighboring Chapel Hill, inviting the travel trade down. And that made a huge difference. I will tell you that there was an inaccurate perception out there that North Carolina was just deeply conservative, period. And there is deeply conservative roots that run through North Carolina. And I think that's why it's so important and impressive with what Carborough has done in policy, in passing non-discrimination ordinances, in supporting the first lesbian mayor, gay mayor, council members, and working with the Chamber of Commerce and the Visitor Bureau and local businesses to get the word out about this constantly. Because it's great that we're a strong community and know about this, but unless the outside traveling world and business world knows our values and the tenets of which we do business, we're not going to see any real results. So our goal strategically is to work together so we're on the same page, and then join these national associations, which have been highly successful for us, to help partner and invite travel media down. That's been a critical part of our success, is the LGBT travel media, what we used to call fam tours, and bringing them down to meet and greet our local community and see its assets.
So it's interesting you brought that up, because one of the points that we sort of argue and claim in our research is that we kind of shy away from the economic impact. One of the things that Rick and his team deal with is looking at sort of the economic proof that inclusion and diversity brings to businesses. We concentrate on the strength it brings to the organization, which is sort of what you close your comment on, that it's not necessarily the economic benefits that LGBT owned or focused or not really can see from this type of inclusionary work. It's how their organizations become stronger. And so, to close this up, I'm curious, what sort of impacts has Carborough, its business community, seen from this focus on inclusion?
Right. Well, number one, the humanitarian outreach of bring your whole self to Carborough is critically important. And bottom line, I think that when you look at companies like Community Marketing Inc., and they're based in Florida, and I encourage everyone to look them up, they specialize in data and analysis. And I think no matter how big or small our businesses are, whether we're for-profit or non-for-profit, we really have to make a case for the dollars we want to spend. So when I asked for $200,000 to spend on LGBT travel marketing, our commissioner said, okay, tell us a little bit about that demographic. And when you look closely at the demographic of the LGBT market, there was a higher propensity for travel, more trips, expenditures, etc. And that's just part of business, it's part of the world we're in. So from a travel standpoint, it's been very helpful to have that information. From an educational, welcoming, y'all mean everyone, please visit. That's really what's most important to us. And we go way out to put that message out there. In fact, our mascot here is the ram, the Tar Heel ram. And we bought a big ram and painted him in rainbow colors and have it outside of our visitor center and say, y'all are welcome. And visitors from all over the world stop and get their picture with that. And just putting that warm welcome ad out there is critically important. But at the end of the day, so are the demographics and the ROI. So I would encourage you to look at both and look at both associations. And it helps all of us at the end of the business day.
Great. Thanks, Lori. So we've heard a lot about the macro impact, and to really dive deep into the micro impact, I'd like to now pitch over to my colleague, Wes Combs, who's going to talk to some of the local business owners in Carborough and about the impact and the impact they've had when they've engaged in inclusionary efforts. Wes?
Thank you.
Thanks, Lawrence, and thank you, Lori, for kicking us off. Today, my name is Wes Combs, and I'm a consultant with the U.S. Chamber. And today, we're going to have a conversation with 3 business owners to hear what they are doing with respect to creating inclusive workplaces for themselves, so the audience can get a perspective about the different places and the journey that these panelists are in, and also so that you can think about what questions you may have about what steps you might want to take as the first step or as the continuation of a step. And that's what the LGBT Inclusion Hub for Small Businesses is all about. It's a place for small businesses to come and learn more about the LGBTQ community. The hub is called LGBT, but in this community, we use lots of different ways of saying that, but LGBTQIA, There's different acronyms, which there's a glossary of terms there, so you can learn more about this, but just for the purposes of this conversation, we're going to say LGBT. And we encourage you to visit the site and see what kinds of resources. And today we're going to talk about what those resources might help you do. And after we have a conversation with the three panelists, we'll open it up to the audience for you to ask any of us questions as well. So if you have a question, please put it in the chat, and the people behind the scenes will make sure that I get the questions, and then we'll get to those questions. But first, I'd like to introduce those on the panel today. Our panelists include Kevin Callahan, who is the chef owner of Acme Food and Beverage Company, which is a community of food service businesses in the Carborough area. Crystal Fisher, who is a partner and broker at Weaver Street Realty, which is a real estate firm. And then finally, Wendy Willer, who is the training and development manager at Weaver Street Market, which is a natural food co-op. And so each of the panelists, and I'll start with you, Crystal, is going to get this first question. And the first question is, tell us a little bit about your role and what your business is all about. And then tell us what inclusion means to a real estate firm.
Well, thank you very much, Wes, and thank you all for putting this together. Weaver Street Realty is a local real estate firm that literally sits on Main Street in Carborough and has been locally owned and operated since 1984. As a Main Street business, it's very critical to play an inclusionary role and to be a leader in inclusion, because you truly are the face of Main Street and thereby the face of that community. So we're really proud to represent an open and inclusive firm. And I myself am one of the brokers, as you mentioned, one of the owners of the firm, business partner there, and also the broker in charge. And I'm very pleased to say that from the moment I joined this firm, it was a policy of openness and inclusion, and right down to the personal aspects of some of my partners who have members of their family who are also in the LGBTQ community as myself. So very, very grateful to be a part of that family and to be able to do our part and contribute as a Main Street business and one of the leaders of inclusion.
I'm going to stay with you for 1 second, Crystal.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about inclusion more broadly, though, not just for LGBT, what does it mean in terms of your business when it comes to how do you define what inclusion means, or what you aim to achieve through inclusion?
Very great question. Our business, our industry is held to a certain standard. We actually have to takes continuing education through ethics courses and learn about fair housing guidelines. And I think it's fantastic because every agent will be held to that particular standard. Realtors take it a step further and agree to these particular ethical guidelines, but there's simply things people should live by, not to discriminate against anybody who needs housing for any reason, and literally keeping open doors. So it is a vital necessity in our world for people to have housing, whether it's rental or purchase. And we have farmers that need land to farm. We have people who are building for affordable purposes for our local workforce to have housing. So it's really an industry that has to stay open-minded, open-hearted, has to be a leader in inclusion, because there should never be anybody who cannot acquire a home because of any type of discrimination. And for our firm, that is also for employment. So for our agents to be signing on as a Weaver Street Realty agent, they are buying into community mindedness, open door concepts, and being open to working with any clients and anybody who in any communities. We are really always trying to learn and grow as individuals and as a firm, because it is a constantly changing. I mean, you just gave us a great example by adding, the LGBTQ community has now added IA, and I literally had to look at my bisexual daughter and get guidance on what does that mean. So I think it's critical for everyone to keep themselves educated and informed, and for our industry in particular to stay in front of that, because we represent a concept of bringing people home, and that is a concept that should be available to everybody.
Great, thank you. Just for the purposes for the audience, LGBTQIA is lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender. The Q can be questioning or queer, which is a way a lot of the community who is younger identifies. I is intersex, and A is ally. So just so you know, those are what those terms mean. There are actually more options that can be added to that long list, but in case. So, Crystal, you made a great point here about, requiring to follow legal guidelines and, not discriminating. Wendy, from a natural food co-op perspective, tell us a little bit more about what your role there is and what inclusion means to you as a business that for the type of business that you're in.
Well, thanks for having me. I have to say I came to the co-op 30 years ago, taking a break from retail clothing management background, just taking a little break. That was 30 years ago. And I really fell in love with the model, the ownership model in the co-op, that we have workers who are owners, and the community, the people who shop in our store, are the other half of the owners. So inclusion takes a really different turn when the people who own the business are the people who work there and the people who shop there. And we've grown into a real town hub, a gathering place. And the idea that we could not pay attention to diversity is just antithetical to that, because we couldn't exist without the entire community, without the support. And our staff needs to be welcomed as well, so they can be welcoming to everyone else in the community. So it's kind of like vital to everything we do, and yes, we sell food, but we really sell a community and a gathering place, and keeping your money local, and all of us have that in common, and that connection to each other and reliance on one another, that's integral to the way we run the business. And I'm not the only one who stuck around for 30 years. I mean, it's something about the model of caring for each other and including everyone. Like, all diversity matters to us, because it's all of us. We'll be leaving someone out if we're not committed to diversity. And our LGBTQ plus staff has really led the way over the time that we've been open, to really paying attention as things change, as the letters change, and we learn more, and young people do it differently than the last generation. Like, we'll be behind if we don't pay attention. We'll lose market share. We'll lose we'll lose what we have if we don't pay attention to our community moving forward, if we don't go forward together.
Great, thank you. So I'm hearing another theme coming here, which is actually echoes what Lori said, which is this being inclusive to everybody makes the community stronger. And, in a time when we experience division in the world around us, this is an example of how bringing people together creates commonality, stronger bonds. And what I'm getting the sense of this town is, when you say Main Street, when I live in Washington, D.C., it's not the same feeling of walking down the street, but this is a place where you go and you see people and it's you're really painting a great picture about what it means to be inclusive and for everybody. And so, Kevin, again, tell us what your journey in the business and how what you define as inclusion and why it matters to your business.
Well, it's great to be talking with all these people, all neighbors. I can hit all of their businesses with a rock from my front door, which is kind of shocking. Living in Washington, you can't do that, but I understand. I guess I've been in this business 34 years, which is a long time. I've seen a bunch of changes in the food world. And I think one of the most powerful parts of, you only are in this business if you're into hospitality, Southern hospitality in our instance. And that's all about welcoming people. And when I first was in the business, one of the things that I saw was how restaurants really brought people from all walks of life together. And I think for us, inclusion is always about that. It's about welcoming people into the place where they get to have dinner with someone they love or with friends or family or business associates. And so inclusion is about the guests that we serve as well as our staff. We sort of jokingly call our staff the island of misfit toys. We're all a bunch of people who, for whatever reason, stumbled upon food service and have found a career in it. The commonality there is not anything that you can draw on. So we need every single type and kind of person imaginable to make this crazy quilt that makes a restaurant succeed and makes food service succeed. And like you said, I think the main thing is that inclusion makes our business stronger. It makes us a better place to be, a more enjoyable place. People recognize themselves when they walk into this restaurant. Mm-hmm. That is so very important. And I didn't know that when we first got into it. And it's really been a remarkable change in the industry, how many more people feel welcome inside of spaces, and how unaware I was when I first got into this business, how businesses had the ability to make people feel not welcome. And I think that's been a big change and a real sort of thrilling change, to be honest.
Great, thanks for that. I'm getting hungry as this conversation goes on. I'm gonna have to come down to Carborough. Wendy, you said something that resonated with me, which is the length of time that you've worked at the co-op. And so what would you say from your own standpoint and your employees about why inclusion is important to them, and what are they looking for in their experience to know that your company is an inclusive place to work?
That's such a good question. We ask ourselves often, how do we keep people for 20, 25 years? We're a grocery store. We make food this is not a glamorous job, and we stay. And I think a lot of it is inclusion and finding family. A lot of people move to places like Carborough. I used to live in New Orleans. People move there too, who didn't quite feel like they fit where they were before. And then you move someplace where you can be your authentic self at work, and the people you work with become that second family. And I think it's really powerful. Your connection to the people you are around every day is so much more important than even what bread bakers become bread bakers because they love bread and it speaks to them, and they can talk about the crumb and the blah, blah, blah. But they really stay baking our bread because of the baker they bake next to, and the family they've developed, and the extension, and the acceptance. And we learn so much about each other. They bring their curiosity to work, and we have, curiosity about one another, because we're not all the same, and we all came from somewhere else. I'm sure someone's born in Carborough. I've just never met them. Everyone came from somewhere else, and we have so many interesting stories, and everyone's. Maybe I'm overstating it, but I feel like everyone is so open and curious, and loving. And it's just, why would you ever want to leave? I'm still here. And a lot of our staff is, I think it's about the camaraderie across diversity and the love that happens across diverse lines.
Thanks for that. You again echo another reason why inclusion matters to the bottom line, and that is higher retention and the costs related to having to retrain people who leave business because they don't feel like they can bring their whole selves to work. Crystal, I'd like to pivot off of something that Wendy said, which was this thing about authenticity and your ability to bring your whole self to work. Can you talk about how that impacts real estate and how you deliver your service?
Absolutely. I would also like to acknowledge that I literally work across the street now from Weaver Street Market at my office at Weaver Street Realty. But I started as a cashier at Weaver Street Realty when my daughter was just 3 years old. And she just turned 21. So it's a very small town, and I still run into people who I met as customers that would come through my line, and we can chat about those days, and I offer them my real estate card. So the truth of I think that term authenticity for a small town like Carborough in particular, but for my industry, we work outside of those walls. So we go to multiple counties to do our job, and there are still a lot of ties to what draws people, and the small town feel of Carborough, that openness and welcoming, the conscientiousness of such a small town, because you just can't get away with anything that the community's not going to hold you accountable for. So I really appreciate that as a business owner in this town, and as a parent in this community. I think that the requirement for individual realtors or real estate agents to bring authenticity to their business is because the bottom line comes to, you are selling yourself first to this buyer or seller, whomever your client is, to hopefully buy your services to represent them. And if you're not going to present an authentic self, and I think you're just going to get found out in the end. It's really too small of a town and too small of an area in general. I'm constantly encountering people, having lived here a few decades. I do indeed run into a lot of people from a lot of my walks of life, but it's not all confined within Carborough. I think it's more concentrated in Carborough.
That's great. So Kevin, I'm going to pivot a little bit more to the journeys that your organizations have been on in becoming more LGBT inclusive, or evolving over time. And, what Crystal just said about authenticity is, that is what builds trust with your community, your customers, your employees, that they believe that you mean what you say. Kevin, can you talk about your journey and what knowledge that you realized you needed to know in order to deliver on that commitment to inclusion? And can you talk a little bit about how that went, and were you able to, where did you learn the things that you needed to do to make people truly believe that you're an inclusive restaurant group?
I think the main thing about, or at least for me, was opening myself up to actually seeing people for who they were. Actually, the sexuality piece attached, or the title, or the whatever was going on, was so minor compared to the other stories in their lives. And I think that was the part that really opened things up, was when the narrative of our guests, or narrative of my coworkers, or my bosses and mentors wasn't built around some label, but was much deeper than that. And I think that really shifted everything. And so it became an important part of me to make sure that when people walked in the door, whether as a guest or employee, we saw them as people first. I think all of us want to be seen for who we are. A lot of people may see me as a restaurant owner, but that's only one real small part of what I am. And I think it's really important for us as employers to make sure that we're seeing the fullness of people, the richness of their lives and their contributions to other people's lives and to our businesses, and how that diversity really creates a wealth of experience that really makes the place warm and social and open. And and that wasn't really part of my life growing up at all. So it was quite an eye-opening experience to sort of be introduced to the community, have it expand and grow, and really make so many pieces of my life better. It was really remarkable.
So one thing that I hear you saying is that, inclusion really is the whole person. It's not the gay employee or the lesbian customer. It is a customer and an employee, and there are many facets to their lives, and approaching them as a whole person and not for what you may think they are and how they identify. And in our community, it is, everybody identifies differently. I'm a white Jewish gay man, but my identity that I identify with may not be my sexual orientation. It may be my Judaism. It may be with what's going on in Israel right now, for example, or it may be how I'm dealing with racial equity. And so it's that important aspect of really understanding the person, and then you getting more curious. Curious is a great thing to learn more, but also understanding how to do that in a way that's respectful. So, Crystal, are there any situations where over the you look to be inclusive and maybe you made a mistake, and how did you handle that? Or there was a situation, what were the resources out there that you leaned on in order to address a situation you may not be familiar with within the community?
Well, as I mentioned, I have that child I lean on probably to keep me in tune with kind of new trends on everything with these newer generations. There's going to be that divide that will continue to grow if I personally don't continue to grow and keep myself open to learning what is going to be important to the next generation of people, or to a different group of people that I personally am not a participant in, but maybe an ally. I need to stay sharp and fresh on all of that. Social media is a platform that I think our industry really does turn to for advertising purposes, moreover, but it really has become, I think, a spokesperson in some ways. I look at TikTok and how it has many voices for many different communities. So I think that there are ways that we need to always be open to learning and gathering that information, and realizing that we will be wrong in some cases. We need to always be open to accepting information and not assuming that we have it all, because it's a really fast changing world. I think the internet has given a major boost to that, and my industry is particularly impacted by that.
So you actually are being a great spokesperson for the hub, because the hub is a place where individuals can go learn more about the community, learn more about pronoun usage, which is something that is, with gender identity and gender expression being so fluid in our communities, in the community, in the world right now. It's really getting smarter on that and making sure from a compliance standpoint, you know what laws exist that you need to be following to ensure that you're not violating any local or federal laws. And so I want to remind the audience that we're in about 3 minutes, we're going to open it up to your questions. I have a couple that are already here. So I'm going to wrap up this part with a question to Wendy and say, as someone who's been doing this 30 years, what advice would you have for other businesses about if they're just starting this journey or they're looking to get more inclusive, what lessons learned might you be able to share with the audience?
Well, if there's anything that seems to be a truism for us, it's that the staff leads more than we do. And we have LGBTQ people in our management team, but really the leadership in our thinking is listening to our staff, especially young, new staff, people coming in or people transitioning in their identity. They really letting them take the lead. Most of our mistakes are ones where, I'm sorry, that's somebody next door, that when we've made mistakes, it's been when we tried to take the lead, when we were like, oh, you're transitioning. This is what we can do for you, instead of saying, what do you want us to do for you? And just letting folks take the lead and tell us what's right for them. And we definitely learned that. That was a stumble for us. And I think really listening is probably the biggest piece of advice I could give to anyone, is listen to people who are from a different group than you, for any sort of diversity, not just this, any marginalized group, to actually ask questions and find out what works for them and what's helpful. And kind of be prepared. Like, we now have, when someone starts, we talk about pronouns. So even if you don't have any background knowing people that don't use the obvious pronoun you expect them to use, like I expect people to call me they and not he, and you didn't expect that. We help people understand when they come in, even if they aren't in the community, that people might be wearing their pronouns on a button, and we make the pronoun buttons available. So we're prepared for people to be supported in expressing their pronoun preference, their correct pronoun, rather than having people guess and stumble over that. And then we also talk to people about when you make a mistake, when you call somebody the wrong pronoun and they tell you, you say, oh, I'm sorry, I'll use that next time. And that's it. And you go on. I mean, it's not, no blood, no foul. You just keep going. And and a lot of this is if you make a mistake, just say, I'm sorry, that was wrong. That wasn't the best way to handle that. And I'll do better next time, and then do better next time.
So to wrap this part up, you really hit the nail on the head, so to speak, which is inclusion is about engaging people and having a dialogue about what is important to them as an employer. If you make policies without asking your employees what is important to them, you find out the hard way when they leave your organization because you chose not to do something they might have wanted to do, or you never asked them how a policy might affect them before you do that. And so that really is an example of how inclusion really is nurtured. It's by having stakeholders involved in the conversations. For example, we're in Pride Month right now, and it would be a great idea for businesses out there to ask their employees or their customers, how would you like us to celebrate Pride this year? How would you like us to do? What would be the way you think that would be great for us to do? And your employees will come up with probably a lot of different ideas, and then that'll show that you actually have trust in them, and you're building a true relationship with them. So I'm gonna now, I think we're going to bring back, we open this up to the questions. I'll start asking some of the questions that have come in. Here we go. Lori is back. Great. So one of the questions that came in, and I will ask. Actually, I'm going to ask you this, Lori, because
yes,
this is for a small business. If anybody else would like to add to this question, please do. But you mentioned some of these things that this question addresses, which is, so from your perspective, as in the Convention and Visitors Bureau and within the chamber, environment, what are you doing to help your leaders, your managers, develop empathy and behaviors and capabilities to be effectively inclusive?
From a visitor bureau standpoint, we really seek diversity on a lot of different levels. We invite members of our board to engage the rest of the community in these conversations. A key member of our board is Carrboro Mayor Lydia Lavelle, who's been instrumental in bringing a lot of these Equality North Carolina issues to our board and opening up equity and inclusion issues. We very much engage ourselves with IGLTA and their training materials as well. And we also have guest speakers come in and talk to our industry. For example, a couple years ago, a friend of mine, a transgender woman, ran against Mayor Lavelle for mayor, and she came in and talked a lot about pronouns and issues and politics, and was much more concerned about the questions she was going to get on stormwater reclamation than anything else. So it tells you about our respect for individualism here, which at the end of the day is really what we're about. We're about respect for individualism. And when you ask people from this country and others what it is about Carrboro and Chapel Hill that stays with them long after they leave, it's not a Disney, it's not a gay bar, it's not an attraction, it's an intangible. It's the sense that when they're here, they're welcome. They do bring their whole selves, and there's both direct and indirect signs of welcome for all, and people feel immediately comfortable being who they are in this community. And it's a value that we constantly protect, safeguard against through policy, through promotion, through basic goodwill. And that respect for individualism has to resonate with everything we do as a board and program. So I would say that's how we prioritize that.
So some of the things that are that you said are really important to creating an inclusive environment, and that is education. And that is, you've done that through inviting people in to speak to your staff to help them better understand what transgender issues are so they can be more knowledgeable. There's on the hub, there are different resources available to help you understand all of the different aspects of who bisexual people are and who are transgender people and what are the issues that are important to them as individuals, as well as employees, and as well as customers. Right now, certainly North Carolina is very familiar with this. The bathroom bills that went through, which were trying to prevent transgender people from using the bathrooms of the gender they identify with versus the gender that they were born. And that is a sign of exclusion. It does not connote that you feel welcome. So Kevin, in your journey over the times, what are you doing with respect to these issues and helping your staff understand what's important about how to approach a situation if a customer is unhappy, or how do they navigate? How do you help them navigate this?
Well, I guess the main thing is we try to give people words and to make our guests feel welcome. Our general manager is a member of the LGBTQ plus community, so he's more naturally tied into it. But I think also we have a lot of very young people who work here, and it's very true that young people are much more aware of these issues, have a lot of clarity around it, have a lot of opinions about it. And for those of us who are in, I use the word senior management because I'm the senior person, we have to listen to them and understand that the questions and the answers that they're bringing are richer and deeper than the ones that I may have brought when I was their age into this industry. And I think that is one of the major ways. And then also, of course, giving everyone the opportunity to be able to discuss things privately that are concerning to them or that they don't understand, that there's an open forum where they can discuss these things and not feel scared of any repercussions for any of their thoughts or ideas or fears or things they want to bring up about working with such a broad group of people.
And when I spoke with you yesterday, you mentioned a word about it's about making people feel safe at work, and that issue that what you just mentioned about the ability, the safe space to, ask the questions that someone might not be understand completely or know how to approach or be uncertain about, and allowing those individuals, letting them know that you can ask me these questions, and that will help the employer certainly know what is the knowledge that people need. But it also may bring up something that you never thought was something that was important to a customer, or or to your staff, that you may be focusing on something that you, for example, having a workplace policy that bans discrimination, but you don't necessarily have a clear understanding of whether or not your bathrooms are gender neutral, for example, and that really might be more important, even though you have it in a policy, how you bringing it to life. Crystal, someone asked this question, and I have a feeling you're going to be good to answer this question. How can successful small businesses like yours help your peers be more inclusive? Some of the other people on Main Street that you might be, your neighbors or other colleagues or real estate firms.
That is a great question. On leading off of the note you just made about the bathrooms in the office, I love it that our office has a little like handmade painted placard above it, and it's simply Princess Leia's buns and then a little Han Solo caricature, so it's the bathroom is for both genders. And so again, taking on a big responsibility, I believe, being a Main Street business, having a Main Street storefront. As I drove in today, the pride flags are waving on every corner in Carrboro, and I really love that. And our storefront window needs to be that same type of a reflection, just the way our community is reflecting that it is open and welcoming and inclusive and diverse. Just by having pride flags flying, we're putting we always have, actually, Lori's husband put a beautiful sticker together that says "Y'all means all." And in the South, everybody knows what y'all is, and it literally entails the word all, but it is beautifully portrayed with a rainbow heart over the North Carolina state. And so it's critical to play the leadership role and present yourself, showing, everything you believe in. We have a Black Lives Matter sign prominently featured in our storefront window. We have the "Y'all means all" stickers all the time, not just during Pride Month, but we're getting our Pride window together. I was very grateful to receive a referral from a couple that said they found me on a Facebook post for LGBTQ friendly realtors. So there's something in just how we are presenting ourselves, wearing our heart on our sleeve and going sleeveless, because you need to be true to who you are, and you need to put that out there and be an exemplar to the neighbors as much as you are to the people you're trying to garner their business.
So I'm going to, as we're coming to a close soon, I'd like to ask the remaining panelists this question, and if you can try to do it as succinctly as possible so that we can have time for the wrap up. What would you say, Wendy, about what a small business, this is a question that came in, how a small business can show its support for the LGBT community without a lot of resources? So we heard Crystal talk about putting a rainbow flag in there, but what other things would be ways that, from a low-cost perspective, that businesses could show their support?
And there are lots of different places that you can show support for any community. One of them is in your advertising for employees, that we're looking for people from all different backgrounds, in your language. And, when you sell products, like we have every kind of pride flag, cupcake, concha you can imagine this year. But I think all the places where you reach out, taking every opportunity you can to say we're including everybody here. And that doesn't cost any extra. You know, it's just what language do you use? That it's inclusive, and it says we want everyone to be I mean, on our job ads, they all say we want everyone to be their authentic selves at work. And, you know, that can say a lot to a lot of different diversities.
So, the point that I really love about what you said is it's how you write your job descriptions, where you place the ad, putting it on job sites that are largely focused on LGBTQ community. It's advertising in an LGBTQ publication showing you don't have to necessarily put a pride flag in the ad. You just have to show that you're a business that knows that this community is important, and by your presence there, that's important. Kevin, what would you say?
Well, certainly, if you're going on a budget, social media is always a good place to launch your thoughts. But I think the main thing that you do is be involved in the community in some real ways, participate financially, and like doing fundraisers or recognizing those pieces of your community, so that it's not just you sitting back passively waiting for those people to come to you, but you're walking out, you're becoming a member of the community, showing sort of that welcome mat, which is not just to a group, but to all groups. Because I think inclusion is, again, it's the recognition of the narrative that each individual brings. And so that when someone walks into the restaurant, they feel seen, they feel a part, they recognize that this is their community, this is their restaurant, not something that they're excluded from. And I think also, like, for us as as a restaurant, like, we do little things, like we make this rainbow cake that we serve that's, you know, a lot of fun, but it's meant primarily to say, hey, this is a delicious part of our community. And it's not something to be feared, it's something to be loved. And that's really important to me.
So I'm going to leave it there. Lori, I'll just put another plug for your husband's design about, is it y'all means everyone, or y'all means all? What is it?
Y'all means everyone. Y'all means everyone. And I believe in the follow-up notes you're going to share with the group, it's in there as well.
So we will be sending everybody who attended today a list of some of the resources that these panelists have used, and also some examples of what they're doing. And I want to thank all of you for sharing your knowledge and helping us understand what it means to be inclusive. And I'll turn it over now to Lawrence.
Thanks, Wes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Apologies for that. My fault. Thanks, Wes, and everyone at the panel who spoke with us today about the importance of LGBT inclusion for small businesses. If you go to our website, uschamberfoundation.org, you'll be able to find all sorts of resources. And in addition to a helpline that Wes himself is on the other end of, if you have specific questions about how your small business can become more inclusive. Thanks again. Have a great afternoon and a great weekend.